The Obsidian Citadel was not built to cradle grief. It was forged from iron will and the spoils of conquest, a stone monument to Alpha King Kaelen Thorne's unyielding power over the northern wastes. Yet, within its labyrinthine structure, a sound more corrosive than any invading army had taken root, the constant, soul-shattering cry of his infant heir, Torin. 3 months had passed since the burial of Lyra, and with her, the tranquility of the castle had been interred. Torin's wail was a living, breathing accusation of Kaelen's failure, a testament to the Alpha's inability to protect his mate, or more humiliatingly, to soothe his own son. Kaelen stood in the shadows of the royal nursery, his hands clenched into fists that could shatter granite. His towering frame, usually a vessel of controlled dominance, was tense with raw, frustrated power. The air in the room, thick with the scent of sterile linens and sour, inconsolable sorrow, scraped against his senses. He was the most powerful werewolf in the north, yet the tiny red-faced pup reduced him to a helpless animal. Every wail was a spike of shame, confirming the whispers that the heir was unstable, that the king was crippled by weakness, the kind of vulnerability that invited challenge. "Silence him," Kaelen ground out, the words rumbling low in his chest. His beta, Darius, flinched, even though the command was aimed at the 3 nurses huddled helplessly near the wall. They were high-ranking healers, selected for their bloodline and training, but none of their salves, songs, or tinctures could break through the infant's relentless anguish. They had failed to replicate the lost magic of the Luna. "My king, we have tried everything," one nurse whispered, shrinking under the direct blast of Kaelen's pheromones, which smelled like storm-churned earth and cold, deadly steel. He seems to sense the lack. He remembers his Luna mother's song, the Luna's song. Kaelen slammed his palm against the polished black marble mantelpiece, the sickening thud barely audible over Torin's renewed, frantic cries. The pack law was explicit. The strength of the bloodline superseded all else. Nurture was the purview of the chosen elite. The lower castes, especially the Omegas, scented, soft, and bred for subservience, not for the royal nursery, were strictly forbidden from contact with the heir. Their very presence was considered a dilution of the sacred alpha blood. This was the structure Kaelen was born to uphold, the rigid hierarchy that ensured the purity and strength of the Thorne line. He turned, his golden eyes narrowed and feral, scanning the silent, paralyzed room. None of these carefully selected women possessed the instinct to stop the suffering. They only had their training. A desperate, almost savage urge rose within him, to tear down the walls, to silence the noise, to crush the grief that was eroding his kingdom from the inside out. He strode toward the cradle, his shadow engulfing the whimpering child. He needed to touch him, to exert his alpha command, but a primal fear held him back. What if his rage frightened the boy more? What if the touch of his broken, grieving heart made the crying worse? Kaelen retreated, his boot falls echoing like pistol shots down the long corridor. He left behind a room filled with despair, the high-pitched, desolate cry chasing him like a curse. Tonight, as on every night for 3 months, the Alpha would find solace only in his own solitude and the crushing weight of his failure. The cry was a beacon of his vulnerability, and somewhere in the shadowy depths of the Citadel, an Omega girl, tucked into the lowest rungs of servitude, heard the royal anguish and felt a dangerous, forbidden pull toward the sound.
Chapter 2. The Cinnamon Scent and the Cracking Law. Elara Vanya worked in the deepest, dustiest sublevels of the Obsidian Citadel, a world away from the polished marble and silver crests of the royal wing. She was an Omega, her status defined by her caste's inherent gentleness and, more importantly, her potent, forbidden scent, a deep, complex mix of cinnamon, clove, and wild honey, the kind that was said to calm fevers and incite reckless desire. For the high caste, Omegas like Elara were functional shadows, meant to be seen only in compliance, their scent masked, their presence muted. Her survival hinged on absolute obedience to the caste laws, the primary of which was, never approach the royal heir. Never seek the gaze of the Alpha. But the king's pup was crying. The sound, thinned by layers of stone and distance, still vibrated in the soles of her worn slippers and burrowed into the fragile core of her being. It was not a normal baby's cry. It was a howl of profound, lonely distress. Every piercing shriek resonated with a familiar ache that Elara knew too well, the feeling of being utterly alone in a vast, cold world. Her mother had sung her a melody in the lowest dungeons before she died, a soothing, rhythmic lunar lullaby that had the power to chase away shadows. The melody rose unbidden in Elara's own chest now. She paused mid-scrub, the scent-masking herb paste she used on the floors momentarily forgotten. The fear was a cold, sharp blade against her ribs. To even think of approaching the royal wing was insanity, an offense punishable by exile or worse. Yet, the image of that small, suffering child fueled a deeper, more primal instinct than fear, the Omega's uncontrollable need to nurture. Her hands, rough from years of manual labor, began to tremble. "Elara, what are you doing?" "Finish that corner now," a sharp voice snapped. It was Corvus, the grizzled beta tasked with managing the Omega staff, his eyes perpetually narrowed in suspicion. Elara bowed so low her spine ached, her own scent suppressed by habit. "Forgiveness, Corvus. I felt a draft." He snarled, unimpressed, but moved on, his attention diverted by a spilled bucket. Elara seized the moment. Tugging her cowl tighter over her head, she dropped the bucket and fled, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She moved through the winding service passages, propelled by an unseen force, toward the source of the distress. The crying grew louder, more frantic, becoming an audible map. The upper corridors were eerily silent, devoid of the usual high-caste foot traffic. They were avoiding the sound, avoiding the contagion of the Alpha's grief. Elara's bare feet were silent on the cold marble, a whisper against the Obsidian Citadel's history of violence. She passed the guarded threshold of the royal wing. The guards, exhausted by the incessant noise, were visibly slumped, their attention dulled. She saw her chance, a narrow window of opportunity born from the pack's collective surrender to the sound. Elara slipped into the nursery an hour later, her breath catching on the cloying sweetness of the royal antiseptic. The room was immense, luxurious, and utterly cold. Pup Torin was flailing wildly in his crib, his face scarlet, his small body rigid with despair. The nurses were gone, having been dismissed in a fit of the Alpha's quiet fury. Only the child remained, and the crushing weight of the castle's loneliness. Elara stood frozen, the scent of her forbidden cinnamon beginning to bloom in the sterile air, a warm, foreign intrusion. She had done the unthinkable. She was here, in the heart of the Alpha's territory, in direct defiance of sacred law, her scent the only thing separating her from brutal punishment. Her eyes fixed on the whimpering child, and she took the first, terrifying step toward the cradle. Chapter 3. The Sanctuary and the Forbidden Touch. The moment Elara's hand, calloused but gentle, settled on the rim of the crib, the atmosphere in the nursery fractured. The ceaseless, hysterical crying did not instantly stop, but it shifted. The desperate pitch dropped, morphing into a series of broken, ragged breaths. Torin's frantic flailing stilled, his wide, tear-filled eyes, the exact gold of his alpha fathers, fixating on the shadowy figure leaning over him. He was drawn not by her appearance, but by the burgeoning tide of her unique, calming scent, a forbidden tide of cinnamon and spice washing away the cold, metallic scent of grief and fear. Elara took a deep, shuddering breath and began to hum. It was not a traditional, sanctioned lullaby. It was the ancient lunar rite her mother had passed down, a low, rhythmic, almost hypnotic sound that spoke of moon cycles, buried memory, and deep, primal comfort. It was the song of the overlooked, the melody of the Omegas. As the sound filled the room, the infant's body went slack. His small fist uncurled. For the first time in 3 months, Torin closed his eyes, his breathing evening out in shallow, quiet puffs. A silence descended upon the nursery, a sudden, deep, profound silence that felt louder than any cry. It was a vacuum in the heart of the Obsidian Citadel, immediately drawing attention. Elara felt the shift in the air, the massive displacement of energy that signaled the arrival of immense power before she even saw him. The scent of storm and cold steel hit her first, followed by the sight of King Kaelen Thorne filling the doorway, his silhouette a masterpiece of controlled, lethal force. He had been drawn by the absence of sound, an anomaly that shocked him out of his solitude. He stopped dead, his golden eyes blazing like banked coals, instantly taking in the scene. The sleeping heir, the forbidden scent of cinnamon, and the Omega girl, crouched beside the cradle, her cowl pulled low, her head bent in a pose that was either reverence or profound fear. Kaelin's pheromones exploded into the room, a silent, terrifying warning. They pressed against Elara's skin, demanding submission, threatening instant, brutal punishment. His scent was so overpowering, so intensely male and dominant, that it made her muscles seize. Her Omega instincts screamed at her to drop, to grovel, to run, but the sight of the sleeping pup held her captive. "Who are you?" Kaelin's voice was low, a dangerous, gravelly whisper that promised violence. He didn't shout, he didn't need to. The sheer force of his presence was enough to send the air vibrating. "How dare you trespass into the royal air? Do you understand the penalty for touching the air?" Elara slowly rose, careful not to disturb the pup, her fear coiling in her gut. She did not meet his eyes. That was a step too far, but she did not immediately cower. She pointed a trembling finger toward the cradle, to the peaceful face of his son. "The air is quiet, my king," she murmured, her voice soft, yet strangely steady, the humming finally ceasing. "The pain is gone." He only needed an older song. The alpha moved then, not with rage, but with a terrifying stillness. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his proximity crushing. He didn't look at her, his gaze was fixed on Torin, searching for any sign of harm or foul play. When he confirmed the pup's deep, tranquil sleep, he turned his focus entirely onto Elara, his intense, predatory eyes locking onto her face. He reached out, not to strike, but to rip the cowl from her head, revealing a cascade of dark, unbound hair and a delicate, determined face. The intensity of their proximity, the clash of their polar opposite castes and scents, his dark, steel authority and her warm, forbidden spice, created a palpable, electric tension. It was the most forbidden gaze in the entire kingdom. He was the king, the alpha. She was a lowly Omega. And over the cradle of his heir, they shared an intimacy more dangerous than any sexual act. Chapter 4. The Alpha's Trial and the First Truce. The Alpha's grip on the cloth of Elara's cowl tightened, his knuckles white. The forbidden proximity was a violation of pack law so severe that the punishment was absolute. Kaelen Thorne was known for his ruthless adherence to the hierarchy, yet he remained suspended, his gaze boring into the dark depths of Elara's eyes. The crushing silence of his son's sleep held him in check, a fragile, beautiful weight counterbalancing his instinct to destroy the trespasser. "Explain," he commanded, the single word cutting through the tension. His breath, hot and smelling faintly of raw dominance, ghosted over her forehead. Elara stood rigidly, her senses overwhelmed by his scent. She felt the heavy thrum of his heartbeat, the sheer power radiating from his enormous body, and she knew she was standing at the edge of the grave. But the lingering feeling of the pup's peace bolstered her. "I heard his despair, my king," she whispered, her gaze still respectfully averted toward his chest. It was the sound of a broken bond. The royal nurses offered medicine and comfort. I offered a memory. My mother, she taught me the moon singer's tune. It is for those left behind. It works with the air, not against it. Kaelen released the cowl, the action a subtle tremor of control. He stepped back, the movement easing the immediate, suffocating pressure, but the tension remained coiled in the air between them. His eyes never left her. He was assessing her, weighing the Omega's life against the tranquility of his heir. Pack law demanded her execution for the unsanctioned touch. His exhausted, grieving father's heart demanded the silence. "If I ordered you punished now," Kaelen growled, his voice laced with the cold promise of retribution, "the child will wake, and his anguish will return. You know this." "Yes, my king." "I know," she replied, her voice nearly inaudible. It was not a threat. It was a simple statement of fact, a testament to the power of her forbidden lullaby. Kaelen began to pace the length of the crib, his frustration a palpable, physical force. He was caught between his duty as the Alpha King and his love for his son. The pack elders would demand a swift, bloody example be made of the low-caste Omega who dared to touch the royal bloodline. But his son was sleeping. "You will remain," he decided abruptly, the decree landing like a hammer blow. "Not as a nurse or a servant of the heir. You are a captive. You will occupy the antechamber. You will enter this room only when commanded, and only for the purpose of silencing the pup. You will wear your cowl at all times. Your scent will be masked with the Citadel's strongest compound. And you will never, ever speak to anyone of what you have done, or the song you used. Do you understand the terms of your service?" Elara's breath hitched. She was not exiled, nor was she executed. She was now a prisoner of the Alpha's need, tethered to the most dangerous man in the north. Her new existence would defy the very laws of the caste system. "I understand, my king," she said, finally raising her eyes, compelled by the force of his command. Their gazes met again, Alpha and Omega, ruler and captive, and the air crackled with a silent, dangerous current. "Good," Kaelen said, his voice dropping to a seductive, predatory rasp. "Know this, Elara Vanya. I have granted you mercy only because my son lives. Do not mistake my desperation for weakness. One wrong move, one whisper, and I will personally ensure your punishment is a lesson the entire North remembers." The threat was intense, but beneath the ice, Elara registered a fleeting, agonizing need in his golden eyes, a raw exhaustion that mirrored her own suppressed ache for belonging. The impossible truce had been struck. Chapter 5: Whispers of Blood and the Knight's Confession. Elara's new existence in the antechamber of the royal nursery was a lonely, terrifying purgatory. She spent her days scrubbing the ornate marble floors under the watchful, hostile gaze of the guards and the occasional, disdainful glare of the disgraced high-caste nurses who now served her food. She was bathed daily in a harsh, scent-masking tincture, an attempt to stifle the sweet, forbidden spice that had so unnervingly calmed the air. Yet, beneath the heavy medicinal overlay, the cinnamon scent persisted, a subtle, constant temptation in the sterile, powerful heart of the Citadel. The routine was established. If Torin began his ceaseless cry, a silent guard would fetch Elara. She would enter, hum the ancient lunar lullaby, and the blessed silence would return. Kaelen would often be present, a dark, imposing sentinel, observing her every movement with an intense, unnerving focus that felt less like scrutiny and more like an elemental force pressing against her soul. One night, the cries were particularly sharp, the anguish of the pup spiking like fever. Elara entered to find the nursery empty, save for the child and the king. Kaelen was standing near the crib, his formidable shoulders slumped, the image of a king stripped bare by grief. He looked exhausted, haunted, the gold in his eyes dull with 3 months of relentless tension. Elara went to the crib and began to hum, the soft melody filling the space. The cry eased immediately. As she worked her quiet magic, Kaelen moved to the window, staring out at the shadow-draped north. His silence was heavy, but tonight it felt less like anger and more like a void. When Torin was finally asleep, Elara prepared to retreat, but Kaelen's voice stopped her, devoid of its usual authority, raw with vulnerability. She hated the cold, the Luna, he confessed, his back still to her, speaking to the distant mountains. Lyra always said this citadel felt like a tomb. She sang him a different song, one filled with warmth and sunlight. When she left, her warmth went with her. "I cannot bring it back. I am only the stone, only the law." Elara felt a sudden, profound rush of empathy, an emotional connection that was more treasonous than her forbidden touch. She saw past the Alpha King, past the conqueror, to the broken mate who had lost his light. Her own mother had loved warmth too, and the memory of that shared loss compelled her forward. "My king," she risked, taking a small step closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "The stone does not have to be cold. It is merely quiet. The silence, it is merely waiting for the right kind of light." Kaelen turned, his movement swift and silent, closing the distance between them with unnerving speed. He stopped inches from her, his scent overwhelming the perfume of the scent mask. His height towered over her, his shadow engulfing her. The raw, predatory intensity returned to his eyes, but it was mixed now with an undeniable, volatile attraction born of shared sorrow. "You speak of light, Omega," he murmured, his deep voice vibrating with dangerous, sensual undertones. He reached out, not to hurt, but to slowly, deliberately graze the line of her jaw with the back of his thumb. The contact was agonizingly brief, a spark of forbidden fire. "You dare to touch my son, and now you dare to touch my grief. Your scent is a distraction, a weakness in my court. You must leave before I forget the law entirely and punish you for the temptation you represent." His words were harsh, a clear reminder of their castes, yet the lingering heat of his touch on her skin betrayed a fierce, underlying desire. His gold eyes searched hers, demanding obedience, but also seeking the solace her presence brought. "Go," he commanded, the words strained. "And do not enter this room again until I summon you, or until the pup is crying. Do you understand? Your life hangs on your discretion." Elara lowered her head, the image of his brief, intense vulnerability seared into her mind. She turned and fled the nursery, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm, recognizing the immense danger of the truce they had established. The Alpha's demand for silence had created a crack in the law, and through that crack, an intense, forbidden intimacy was beginning to bleed. She was no longer just a servant. She was the king's necessary secret. Chapter 6: The Alpha's Decree and the First Glimmer of Trust. The forbidden truce could not remain a secret. The sudden, consistent silence from the royal nursery was too profound an anomaly to ignore. Within a week, the castle was buzzing with whispers, a low, dangerous hum of speculation about the king's new, shadowed obsession. The Beta, Darius, and the head Omega, Corvus, eventually approached Kaelen in his private solar, their faces stiff with the duty of confrontation. "My king, the elders are restless," Darius stated, his voice carefully neutral. "The cessation of the heir's cries is a blessing, but the rumors of the Omega's presence are a poison. Pack law dictates absolute segregation of the bloodlines in the royal heir. To allow one of the lowest caste to touch your son, it is a grave offense to the memory of the Luna and the purity of the Thorne line." Corvus, bolder in his indignation, added, "She is known for her disruptive scent, my king. She must be removed and punished before this lapse in judgment weakens the Citadel. Her insolence is a threat to the hierarchy." Kaelen listened, not with his usual fiery rage, but with a terrifying, icy stillness. He rose from his obsidian throne, his towering presence immediately dominating the room. The scent of storm steel and absolute authority filled the air, demanding instant submission. Lapse in judgment. Kaelen's voice was dangerously quiet. He did not deny the Omega's presence. He reframed it. "My son was drowning in grief. His anguish was shattering the integrity of the Citadel. The bloodline's strength lies in its survival, not in a blind, rigid adherence to a law that failed to protect him." He walked toward them, forcing them to instinctively step back. "Elara Vanya did not enter my son's nursery as a low-caste Omega seeking power. She entered as a tool, a necessary catalyst to restore the heir. She is a specialized servant, a singer of silence, under my direct, personal command. I have not violated the law. I have reinterpreted the law. Her duty is not to the caste. It is to the king. It is service to the heir." Kaelen's eyes, burning gold with unassailable alpha power, fixed on Darius. You will inform the elders of my decree. The girl remains. She is under my protection. Any action against her, any attempt to undermine her service, will be treated as an act of treason against the throne and the heir. Her presence is not a weakness, but a sign of the Alpha's willingness to use all means necessary to secure the future. Darius and Corvus bowed low, shock warring with the primal need to obey. The decree was a colossal shift, marking a turning point from ruling through fear to guiding through a protected need. That evening, the shift in the power dynamic manifested physically. Kaelen summoned Elara to the nursery, not for the song, but to simply be present while Torin slept. He watched her from his chair, a massive, brooding figure, while Elara cleaned a spilled cup of water near the crib. She was no longer wearing the rough, scent-masking cloth, having been given a slightly softer, yet still subdued gown. The cinnamon scent was faint, but undeniably present, weaving a thread of warmth through the cold marble room. "The air is quiet, Elara," Kaelen spoke, using her name for the first time with a measured intimacy that sent a shiver down her spine. "The pack is speaking of me as merciful." He scoffed, a dark, self-deprecating sound. "It is not mercy. It is calculated self-interest. Do not confuse it." Elara looked up, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "Mercy is often misunderstood, my king. Sometimes it is the highest form of self-interest. It is protecting what brings you peace." Kaelen studied her, a flicker of dark admiration in his eyes. She saw him not just as a king, but as a man desperately clinging to the peace she provided. In that brief, silent exchange over the sleeping air, the command and fear relationship deepened into a dangerous, unspoken trust. Chapter 7. The Weight of Silence and Scent. Following Kaelen's public decree, Elara was moved from the cold antechamber into a small, private room adjacent to the royal nursery. The move was a clear violation of precedent, a structural shift in the Obsidian Citadel that the pack could not ignore. She was now physically situated one short, silent corridor away from the king's personal quarters, an Omega-occupying space previously reserved for only the highest-ranking betas, or the Luna's companions. The proximity was a torment and a strange kind of sanctuary. Elara's constant presence, even behind the closed door of her new room, began to subtly infuse the royal wing with her calming scent. The heavy, sterile atmosphere of the wing, which had previously held the metallic tang of grief and the bitter undertones of Kaelen's rage, softened. The air was no longer abrasive. It was quiet, haunted, but now underlaid with a faint, warm note of spice. This shift in the sensory landscape of the castle became a canvas for reinvested empathy. Guards became less hostile, the few visiting nobles less tense. Kaelen noticed the change acutely. His own volatile temper, once a hair trigger of pure alpha dominance, was now contained within a tighter leash. He found himself inexplicably lingering in the corridors near the nursery, not merely to check on Torin, but to breathe the air, to absorb the calming effect of the Omega's near presence. The power struggle within him, Alpha King versus Broken Mate, was being fought on the battlefield of scent. One afternoon, Kaelen entered the nursery to find Elara on her knees, polishing the edges of the crib. Her cowl momentarily slipped back to reveal the slender curve of her neck. Her focus was intense, her movements precise. She hummed softly as she worked, a melody so low it was almost subconscious, yet its rhythm was perfectly attuned to the slumbering child. Kaelen stopped in the doorway, mesmerized by the simple, domestic intimacy of the scene, an intimacy he hadn't witnessed since the Luna's death. The floor near the crib was still wet from the polish. As Elara turned to retrieve a rag, she slipped. Kaelen moved instantly, his predatory speed overriding all thought. He caught her, his massive hands closing around her upper arms, pulling her against the hard, unyielding wall of his chest. The contact was a seismic shock. Elara gasped, her smaller body flush against his, the suppressed, sweet warmth of her Omega scent exploding outward on a rush of adrenaline and fear, crashing headlong into his cold, storm steel authority. For one blinding moment, there was no king and no Omega, only two werewolves locked in a fierce, unintended embrace. The scent of cinnamon and wild honey was intoxicating, overwhelming the scent mask and assaulting Kaelen's senses with an almost painful intensity. His hands, meant to govern a kingdom, clenched, feeling the delicate bone and soft flesh beneath her simple tunic. His gaze dropped to her mouth, his eyes dark with sudden, volcanic desire. The prohibition was absolute, the desire instantaneous. Elara pushed away, shame and terror flooding her system, but Kaelen's grip remained, a vice of power and confusion. "Do not move," he commanded, the words strained, his voice husky. He was fighting his own elemental response. "The floor is wet." He held her captive for another agonizing moment, his heat searing through her clothes, before he abruptly released her and took a deliberate step back, turning his face away to regain control.
"Go.
Finish your work. And be more careful, Elara." Such carelessness could lead to a severe distraction. The warning was aimed at her, but his ragged breathing suggested the distraction was entirely his own. The close, forbidden touch had irrevocably stirred a reformulation of who belonged where, proving that empathy could ignite a desire more potent than law. Chapter 8: Whispers of Punishment and the Alpha's Shield. The incident in the nursery left a burning imprint on both the Alpha and the Omega. The memory of their pressed bodies, the dizzying confluence of their scents, created a hyper-awareness between them, a silent, electric current that pulsed beneath every interaction. The power dynamic was shifting from fear-based obedience to a charged, reluctant partnership. The increased leniency granted to Elara, however, was not overlooked by the pack's established hierarchy. Corvus, the head Omega, was seething. He saw Elara's rising proximity to the throne as a dangerous crack in the structure he was sworn to uphold. Her scent, that constant, soft violation, was now subtly detectable throughout the wing, and Corvus decided to reassert his control. One evening, as Elara was retrieving fresh linens from a service closet in the lower levels, Corvus cornered her. His scent, laced with stale dominance, was cloying and hostile. "You have grown too accustomed to the high air, girl beneath the stairs," Corvus spat, using the old, derogatory term for her caste. "The king's foolish mercy has made you insolent. Your scent is a scandal. The masking is not complete. You believe your lullaby grants you immunity." He reached out, his hand snapping out to deliver a stinging blow to her face, a quick, brutal correction for insubordination. Before the blow could land, a sound like a distant, approaching storm filled the corridor. Kaelen Thorne, having sensed the Omega's distress through the faint spike of her fear pheromones, an alarming sensitivity he couldn't control, rounded the corner, his alpha form moving with lethal, controlled fury. He was in his warrior leathers, having just returned from a boundary patrol, and his presence was a blast of raw, untamed power. He didn't speak a command. He simply emitted a roar of pure, elemental alpha dominance, a sound that shook the dust from the ceiling. Corvus froze mid-swing, his eyes wide with terror, dropping instantly to his knees, whimpering as Kaelen's force pressed down on him. Kaelen strode forward, his massive hand grasping Corvus's collar and lifting the heavy beta until his feet barely touched the ground. Kaelen's eyes were molten gold, the warning absolutely clear. "You dare lay a hand on what is mine to command." Kaelen's voice was a low snarl, thick with a possessive instinct that superseded politics. "I gave the law, and I will enforce the law. This Omega service is essential. To strike her is to strike at the heir's peace. It is an act of rebellion." He dropped Corvus with a violent thud. "You are relegated to the outer kitchens. You will not step foot in this wing again. If I hear a whisper of you interfering with my command, your lineage will be stripped and your exile will be absolute." Corvus, broken and humiliated, scrambled away, his body shaking. Kaelen turned to Elara, his pheromones slowly receding but still potent, his breathing heavy. Elara was leaning against the wall, pale but unharmed, watching him with wide, shocked eyes. He had protected her, not out of love, but out of a fierce, possessive need for the peace she represented. His mercy had been violently tested, and his decision to shield her marked a critical, irreversible turning point. He stepped closer, his gaze sweeping over her face, checking for injury. "You are unharmed?" "Yes, my king." "Thank you," she managed, her voice trembling. "Do not thank me," he said, his voice curt. "Maintain your discretion. Your safety is contingent on your obedience. Now return to the nursery. I require the scent of peace." His eyes lingered on her for a moment too long, before he turned on his heel and strode away, leaving Elara to comprehend the magnitude of her new, dangerous protection. She was the Alpha's shield against the world, and he was hers. Chapter 9. The Breath of Letting Go and the Study's Confession. The brazen protection Kaelen had afforded Elara transformed her. She was no longer just the girl beneath the stairs, but the Alpha's designated quietude, the untouchable secret. Yet, she found the burden of his control to be an unbearable, gilded cage. The pup, Torin, was now calmer, but she sensed a lingering sadness in him, a hunger for touch and unfiltered affection that the Alpha's sterile arrangements could not provide. The next morning, Elara committed the second great defiance of her life. She sought out the Alpha, unsummoned, bypassing the guards who now hesitated to stop her, and proceeded to his private study adjoining the throne room. It was a dark, intimidating space, filled with ancient scrolls and the heavy scent of Kaelen's own demanding intellect. Kaelen was at his massive, stone desk, reviewing battle maps, the Alpha King in his full, terrifying element. The moment she entered, the air crackled with his sudden, controlled fury. "You were not summoned," he stated, his voice flat with lethal disappointment. He did not look up immediately, allowing his power to settle over her, testing her resolve. "This is a direct violation of my command. Why are you here, Omega?" Elara walked to the edge of the desk, planting her feet, refusing to bow or tremble. "I am here for the heir, my king. You have silenced his cry, but you have not healed his heart. He needs more than a song and silence. He needs his father's touch, not his command. The law that keeps us apart is also keeping you from your son. That law is a failure." The statement was a devastating truth bomb, an unprecedented audacity. Kaelen finally looked up, his face a mask of furious disbelief, his eyes flashing dangerous gold. He rose slowly, tipping the balance of the room, and walked around the desk until he was directly in front of her. "You speak of law to the Alpha King?" he snarled, his pheromones spiking so sharply that Elara's vision swam. "Your insolence is extraordinary. Do you know what I should do to you right now for daring to step into my sanctum?" "You should listen to the truth," Elara replied, her voice low but steady, refusing to back down. Her courage was a terrifying, almost physical thing. "I offer a lifeline. You offer a contract. But a child needs a bond. You command fear, but you need to give love. That is the true meaning of power, not domination, but the courage to let go of your fear and offer healing." Kaelen stopped, arrested by her sheer, unyielding gaze. Her courage, born of maternal instinct, was a beautiful, dangerous thing. The rage in his eyes began to mix with a burning, raw admiration. He suddenly reached out, not to hurt, but to pull her against the front of his body, caging her between his desk and his formidable frame. "You dare to lecture me on power, Elara Vanya," he breathed, his mouth inches from hers, the forbidden scent of cinnamon and steel clashing intensely. "The power of the Alpha is absolute. But the power you possess, the power to undo a king, to bring peace where my strength cannot, that is a far more dangerous game." He captured her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones, his touch intensely possessive. "You are the breath of letting go. But I cannot let go of you, Omega. You are too necessary. I want to taste your truth, Elara. I want to know the softness you sing into my son." His gaze dropped to her mouth, and the lines of command and fear utterly dissolved. He lowered his head, not for a kiss of passion, but a kiss of intense, possessive need, a devastating, steamy press of his hard, authoritative mouth against her soft, responsive lips. It was a confession, a violation, and the most powerful moment of yielding the alpha had ever experienced. He pulled back, his breathing ragged, his eyes dark with the aftermath. "Now you may speak of the heir's heart," he commanded, his voice trembling slightly. "But know that your trespass now binds you to me in a way the law can no longer sever." Chapter 10. The Unspoken Love and the Softening of Stone. The kiss in the study, a feverish, electric fusion of power and desperation, marked the full, terrifying acknowledgement of their mutual attraction. Kaelen and Elara were now bound by a secret so profound, so absolutely forbidden, that it threatened to unravel the entire caste system of the North. Following the confrontation, Kaelen's behavior shifted fundamentally. He did not attempt to kiss her again, but the invisible barrier between Alpha and Omega was shattered. He began consulting Elara openly, dismissing the high-caste nurses who offered only their book knowledge. He would sit with her during the late hours, allowing her to speak of Torin's needs, not just his physical requirements, but his need for a connection to the lost Luna. Elara's advice was simple. "He misses the memory of his mother's presence, my king." A garment, a pillow, an object that held her scent. The air must be filled with her memory, not just the grief of her absence. Kaelen listened, his golden eyes fixed on her, no longer with suspicion, but with a quiet, deepening admiration that was an unspoken form of love. One night, he led her away from the nursery, through hushed, ancient corridors, to the former royal chamber, the room of Luna Lyra. It was preserved as a shrine, scented with dry flowers and the ghost of the Luna's light. Her private sanctuary, Kaelen murmured, his voice thick with a sudden, aching vulnerability. "I cannot bring myself to touch anything here. It has been locked since the funeral." He walked to a cedar chest and opened it, pulling out a soft, shawl woven with silver thread, Lyra's favorite comfort item. He held it out to Elara, an offering of profound trust. She wore this often. Can you weave the memory of her scent into the nursery? I need him to feel her peace without having to feel my pain." Elara took the shawl, the soft fabric smelling faintly of sun-warmed lavender and the Luna's gentle, earthy scent. The request was a plea, a confession of his own vulnerability. It was a request for partnership, not command. "I will, my king," she said softly, clutching the shawl to her chest. In that quiet chamber, the distance between them narrowed to an emotional thread. Kaelen, the conquering alpha, reached out and gently brushed a stray lock of Elara's dark hair back from her face, a featherlight, tender gesture. "You are more than a tool, Elara," he admitted, the words barely audible. "You are the one who has shown me that my strength does not lie in the stone of the citadel, but in the softness of my son's sleep, and in the courage of the Omega who refuses to fear me." He stepped back, the intensity of his eyes holding a vow. The relationship had evolved into a shared guardianship, rooted in mutual necessity and the nascent, profound affection that transcended their castes. The Alpha's heart, once encased in fear and command, was softening, and the Omega's song was now the sacred rhythm of his kingdom's destiny. The true power was no longer the throne, but the quiet, dangerous love blooming in the shadow of the crib. Chapter 11. The Shadow of the Elders and the Alpha's Defense. The blatant, continued presence of Elara in the royal wing and Kaelen's visible dependence on her finally provoked the full fury of the Shadow Council, the most rigid and conservative faction of the Pack Elders. They viewed the Omega's influence as an insidious contamination, a spiritual and genetic weakening of the sacred Thorne lineage. A formal convocation was called in the Grand Assembly Hall. Kaelen sat on the throne, radiating calm authority, but his posture was that of a predator guarding its young. Elara was not present, but she was the only topic of discussion. Elder Varys, a gray-muzzled beta with centuries of tradition etched onto his face, stood to deliver the indictment. The king's actions are unacceptable. He has elevated a low-caste Omega, a singer of subservience, to a position of intimacy with the heir. Her scent is unmasked, her person is protected, and her influence is now structural. This is a betrayal of the Thorne Covenant, my king. We demand her immediate removal and a public trial for gross violation of the bloodline laws. Her defiance, however unintentional, threatens to destabilize the entire hierarchy. The hall was filled with the low growls of agreement. The air was thick with challenge pheromones, testing Kaelen's resolve. Kaelen waited until the noise subsided, then spoke, his voice ringing with a cold, absolute conviction that silenced the chamber. Trial will not be granted. Her service is protected under royal decree. And let me correct your perspective, Elder Varys. Elara Vanya's lullaby is not a song of subservience. It is a song of survival that succeeded where your sanctioned laws and healers failed. My son, the future of the Thorne bloodline, was dying of grief. She saved him. Therefore, her value to the heir is higher than any of your archaic regulations. He leaned forward, his eyes burning gold. You speak of destabilization. I tell you, your rigidity is the true destabilizer. A king who cannot protect his own heir because of foolish custom is a king who deserves to fall. I am challenging your dogma, not the pack's strength. True strength includes the wisdom to adapt. Elara Vanya is the living proof that care, not coercion, sustains the kingdom. Kaelen then delivered the final, stunning blow. Effective immediately, Elara Vanya will be officially designated the guardian of the heir. This title is a new power center, rooted in service to the heir's well-being, and is bestowed by the king's absolute authority. She is not a mate, she is not a Luna, but her rank is now protected, untouchable, and her duty is paramount. Her service to the heir is more important than any rigid rank. The hall erupted in shocked silence, followed by murmurs of outrage. Kaelen had not just protected her, he had established a new position of power, reframing leadership. He stood, his height and sheer alpha power quelling all further argument. He had sacrificed the approval of the elders for the stability of his home and the presence of his necessary Omega. When he returned to the nursery, he did not mention the confrontation, but the scent of his victory, a subtle blend of storm and relieved tension, filled the air, informing Elara that the pack law had cracked wide open for her. Chapter 12. The Moonlight Ritual and the Fever's Grip. The Obsidian Citadel was suddenly plunged into chaos by a fierce, unexpected mid-spring storm. Winds howled, rain lashed against the stone, and the entire edifice seemed to shake under the assault. Worse than the physical storm was the biological one. Torin, the infant heir, fell gravely ill, his small body burning with a high, relentless fever. The sanctioned healers were summoned, their serums and traditional remedies failing to break the fever's grip. Torin's shallow breathing grew ragged, and his cries became weak, piteous moans. The pack's fear was palpable, the memory of the Luna's death, also during a terrible storm, hung over the castle like a shroud. Kaelen stood vigil by the crib, his face a mask of granite, his heart a raw wound. He was reliving the absolute helplessness of 3 months prior. He gripped the edge of the crib, his massive frame trembling with suppressed emotion. He is fading, he whispered, his alpha strength useless against this internal enemy. Elara, the healers are failing. Do you have anything left? Any ancient remedy, any whisper of a cure that you held back? Elara, pale with fear but utterly composed, approached the crib. She placed her hand on Torin's burning forehead, her sweet cinnamon scent battling the harsh stench of sickness. The healers rely on the physical, my king. The fever is draining him. It is spiritual as much as physical. There is an ancient way, a lunar rite. It is called the sacrifice of the song. It uses an Omega's life force, linked through the moon singer's tune, to draw out the fever's heat. It is incredibly dangerous. It can only be performed by moonlight, and it demands a heavy price from the singer. Kaelen's eyes snapped to her face, a ferocious protectiveness overriding his desperation. Absolutely not. I forbid it. Your duty is to the heir, not to sacrifice yourself. I will not lose you too. You have already lost him if we do nothing, Elara countered, her gaze unflinching. I am the guardian of the air. My duty is to sustain life. The storm is covering the moon, but the moon's power is in the song. I must try. Before Kaelen could issue a physical command to stop her, Elara moved. She ordered the guards to extinguish all firelight in the nursery, relying only on the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the room. She wrapped Torin in Luna Lyra's shawl and knelt beside the crib. She began to sing the lunar lullaby, but this time, it was different. It was a raw, primal chant, her voice rising and falling with the wind outside. As she sang, a faint, silvery light, not the sun, but the ethereal reflection of the storm-shrouded moon, began to leak into the room. Elara closed her eyes, and Kaelen watched in horrified fascination as the cinnamon scent in the room intensified, growing almost painfully sweet, and then began to fade, replaced by the faint scent of ash and exhaustion. Her song was pulling the heat out, fusing the Omega's care with ancestral magic. Her small, delicate body was taut with the effort of the magical transference. The air in the room grew colder. Torin's fever flush began to drain, the red slowly receding from his skin. Elara's face, conversely, was damp with sweat and dangerously pale. She was sacrificing herself, giving a piece of her life force to save the Alpha's heir. The most powerful man in the north stood utterly helpless, witnessing the raw power of maternal instinct and an unspoken, sacrificial love. Chapter 13. The Vow and the King's Submission. The fever broke with the force of a thunderclap. Torin, drenched in sweat but breathing evenly, slipped into a deep, peaceful sleep. Elara, however, collapsed beside the crib, her song dying in her throat, her body utterly depleted. The faint scent of cinnamon was gone, replaced by the sterile, frightening scent of magical and physical exhaustion. Kaelen rushed to her side, ignoring his son for a moment, his heart seized by a cold, desperate fear he hadn't known since Lyra's final breath. He lifted Elara's limp, weightless body into his arms. She was dangerously cold, her pulse thready beneath his fingers. He carried her to his own private bedchamber, a sacred space where no Omega had ever set foot. He laid her gently on his massive, fur-covered bed, his movements precise and tender, fueled by a ferocious, elemental need to protect her. He used his own alpha power to generate heat, pouring his warmth and life force into her chilled body, his powerful scent enveloping her like a blanket. "Elara," he whispered, leaning over her, his voice rough with emotion, his usual mask of authority completely gone. "Why? Why would you risk everything?" Elara's eyes flickered open, heavy and dark. She managed a weak, exhausted smile. "He is the heir, my king. I am the guardian. I could not watch him drown in his mother's absence. I needed to show you that love is the transformative force, stronger than hierarchy." Kaelen looked at her, the last vestiges of his proud, detached control crumbling. He realized that this fragile, resilient Omega had done more than save his son. She had saved him. She had forced him to admit his absolute need, his terrifying vulnerability. He took her small, cold hand in his, pressing it to his chest, over his frantic, thudding heart. "I was a fool," he confessed, his voice choked with emotion, the first time the Alpha King had ever admitted a flaw. "I ruled by stone and law. I forgot what strength truly meant. It is not the power to command, but the gentleness to protect what is vulnerable." He looked down at her, his golden eyes filled with a raw, undeniable love that transcended their castes and his own pride. "I am not merely grateful for your service, Elara. I am undone by your sacrifice. You are mine, not as a servant, but as the co-pilot of the heir. I vow this. I will protect you from the elders, from the pack, and from myself. You will not be punished for your forbidden touch. You will be honored for your forbidden courage." He leaned down and pressed a deep, possessive kiss to her forehead, a sign of eternal commitment that surpassed any formal mating ceremony. It was a vow of protection, partnership, and an acceptance of reciprocal love. Kaelen Thorne had surrendered, his iron rule submitting entirely to the tenderness of the Omega. Chapter 14, Guardian of the Heir, a new era. The aftermath of the fever and the successful, if dangerous, ritual sent shockwaves through the Obsidian Citadel. The fact that the Omega's ancestral magic had succeeded where all sanctioned healers had failed was a truth the elders could not deny. Furthermore, the knowledge that Kaelen had placed Elara in his own private chambers, protecting her and nursing her back to health, spoke volumes about the change in his allegiance. The day Elara was well enough to return to the nursery, Kaelen called a full assembly. He stood before his pack, not in his ceremonial armor, but in his plain leathers, holding the now healthy heir, Torin, in his arms. Elara stood beside him, draped in a simple, soft linen, her demeanor one of quiet strength. "The heir is stable," Kaelen announced, his voice carrying the authority of a newly converted believer. "The heir lives because of the courage of Elara Vanya and the strength of the Moonsinger's right. She proved that the heart of the pack is not in its ferocity, but in its capacity for care." He looked directly at the Shadow Council, his eyes unwavering. "I have formally bestowed upon her the title Guardian of the Heir. This is not a meaningless honorific. It establishes a new power center in Silvercrest. The Guardian's role is to advise the king on matters of well-being, nurture, and the internal strength of the pack, particularly concerning the low-castes and the young. Her word will be heard and respected." The declaration was systemic change, an era in which tenderness was officially designated as a component of leadership. He was making her a public figure, giving her a voice in the court, and cementing her position as his partner in all but name. That evening, Elara joined Kaelen for dinner in his private dining hall, an unprecedented intimacy for an Alpha and an Omega. The meal was simple, the conversation quiet. "You have protected me, my king," Elara said, looking across the table at the brooding, transformed Alpha. "But you have placed a heavy weight on me. I am a target for your critics. The title is a shield, but it is also a challenge to the old order." Kaelen reached across the dark wood and took her hand, his touch now a blend of reverence and possessive heat. "Let them challenge me. I will not rule through fear anymore, Elara. We will rule through care. Your vulnerability will be my strength. I need your eyes to see the things I ignore. I need your voice to sing what I cannot speak. We are a different kind of family, a different kind of leadership." He traced the sensitive pulse point on her wrist. The castle was a fortress. Now it is becoming a home. That transformation is entirely your doing. I am the Alpha, but you are the foundation. The dinner, quiet and intimate, cemented their bond, a shared destiny built on the wreckage of old laws. The Alpha and Omega were standing together, the child a living symbol of a new era defined by partnership and mutual respect. Chapter 15, The Song Beneath the Moon and the Shared Heartbeat. Life within the Obsidian Citadel settled into a new, stable rhythm. Torin flourished, his once relentless cry replaced by contented gurgles and small, happy sounds. The subtle, persistent scent of cinnamon and spice now permeated the royal wing, a constant reminder of the Omega's presence and the Alpha's choice. The old hierarchy was deeply unsettled, but the undeniable stability and peace in the air quelled open dissent. Elara continued her duties as guardian, her power center rooted in her care for the heir and her undeniable influence over the king. Her relationship with Kaelen deepened into an intense, quiet, and fiercely possessive love. The steamy tension between them was a constant, undercurrent that they managed with rigorous control, always mindful of the eyes of the Citadel, yet constantly aware of the shift in the other's scent, the flicker of a shared glance. Late one night, under a sky finally cleared of storm clouds, allowing the full, cold silver of the moon to pour through the arched windows, Kaelen found Elara sitting by the window in the nursery, holding Torin against her chest. She was humming the Moonsinger's lullaby, not as a desperate cure, but as a song of deep, abiding comfort. Kaelen approached her silently, standing behind her, his large frame encompassing her small one. He reached out and wrapped his arms around her and the heir, folding them both into the protective shield of his body. The contact was purely protective, yet intensely sensual, a man claiming his entire world in one embrace. Elara leaned back against his solid chest, the sheer, intoxicating power of his scent surrounding her, mixing with the sweet scent of her own peace. "He is sleeping well tonight, my king," she murmured, her voice soft. "And so am I," Kaelen confessed, his chin resting on the crown of her head. "For the first time since Lyra left, I can sleep without the fear of his scream. You have restored my peace, Elara. You have given me a home." He tightened his arms, his possessive heat a silent promise. "We are a triangulation, Elara. The Alpha's strength, the Omega's song, and the Heir's life. We are the center of a new world." Then, in a gesture of profound vulnerability, Kaelen began to hum, a deep, resonant rumble in his chest. It was the low, rhythmic harmony that complemented the Omega's soft melody, the Alpha's heartbeat and the Omega's song beating in unison. It was their shared language, their unspoken love, a testament to two different worlds colliding to create something whole. Kaelen then reached down and covered Elara's hand, which rested on the baby's back. He turned his head and pressed a long, hungry kiss into the sensitive junction of her neck and shoulder, a steamy, intimate moment of private claim. "I may not have mated you under the old law, guardian," he whispered, his warm breath sending shivers down her spine. "But you are the mate of my heart, the consort of my purpose. Our bond is stronger than any ceremony. You saved us, and now you belong to the heir, and the heir belongs to us both." The shared song beneath the moon was the emblem of a new world, a private, sacred moment of commitment that irrevocably rewrote the kingdom's destiny. The Alpha was singing, the Omega was protected, and the castle was finally at peace. Chapter 16. The Test of Succession and the Alpha's Public Choice. The stability brought by Elara's presence did not dissolve the political threat posed by the elders. The formal designation of Guardian of the Heir was a radical move, but it did not provide an answer to the fundamental question of succession. Should Kaelen fall, the Omega's influence would be immediately stripped, and the old laws would return to punish her and raise the heir under their rigid control. Elder Varys, leading the conservative faction, presented a formal challenge to Kaelen's council. The king's attachment to the Omega, while providing temporary peace, is a vulnerability. The true test of a king is to choose a Luna who strengthens the bloodline and provides a legitimate, high-caste successor. The Guardian of the Heir is a title of service, not of mate status. The king must secure the line. He must choose a Luna. The pressure was immense. The elders presented 3 high-ranking, genetically flawless candidates from allied packs, each one a strategic asset. Kaelen felt the crushing weight of duty battling his undeniable, steamy love for Elara. To choose a Luna would protect his son politically, but it would shatter the fragile peace and betray Elara. Kaelen retired to his private study, the room where their forbidden intimacy had first been established. He summoned Elara. She entered, her quiet strength and sweet scent a balm to his agitated spirit. "The decision is upon me, Guardian," he stated, his voice tight. He spread the portraits of the 3 potential Lunas on his desk, beautiful, powerful women, all of them suitable. "If I choose one of these, you will be safe politically. Your position will be formalized under a new Luna, albeit at a distance. But you and Torin will be protected." Elara looked at the portraits, then at the Alpha, a quiet sorrow in her eyes. "And you, my king? Where will your peace reside? You have found tenderness with me, not with law. To choose a Luna now is to lie to your pack, to yourself, and to the heir you have worked so hard to sustain." She walked to him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, a gesture of deep, forbidden comfort. The true strength is not in a political contract, but in the honesty of your heart. If you choose another, you choose the cold stone again. If you choose me, you choose a future where the rule of law is tempered by the rule of love. The steamy tension was suffocating. Kaelen pulled her against him, burying his face in the glorious, warm cinnamon scent of her hair, his arms like iron bands around her. He was torn between duty and desire, between cold rule and the possibility of real, shared power. The next day, Kaelen stood before the council. He did not choose a Luna. Instead, he made a public declaration that stunned the pack into silence. The Thorne line is not in need of a political marriage. It is in need of healing and true guardianship. Until the heir is of age, I will take no mate. The current stability is the paramount concern. The guardian of the heir, Elara Vanya, will remain the highest authority within the Citadel, subservient only to the king. The matter is closed. It was not a claim of love, but it was a bold, public defense of their partnership, risking the wrath of the elders for the sake of his heart. Kaelen had chosen Elara's presence over political expediency, making an undeniable claim on her that solidified their unspoken bond. Chapter 17. The Alpha's Vulnerability and the Consummation of Trust. The public declaration intensified the private, steamy tension between Kaelen and Elara. By rejecting the political options, Kaelen had declared his emotional fealty to the Omega. Their interactions became charged with an almost unbearable eroticism. Every shared glance, every lingering touch over the air, was a silent confirmation of their taboo love. One evening, Torin was restless, stirring frequently in his sleep. Kaelen, unable to rest, found himself alone in the nursery with Elara. The moonlight bathed the room, softening the harsh edges of the stone. "I cannot sleep tonight," Kaelen confessed, his voice rough. He walked to the window, his back to her, and unclasped the heavy, restrictive silver collar that contained his most volatile alpha pheromones, a collar he never removed in the presence of anyone, even the Luna. He was offering a profound, physical confession of trust. Elara gasped softly, watching him shed his protective layer. His scent, unfiltered and overwhelming, rushed toward her, pure, dominant alpha, an intoxicating blend of cold steel and raw, untamed earth. It was a direct, irresistible call to her Omega core. "The nightmares of the past few months, they linger," Kaelen admitted, turning slowly to face her. His eyes were dark, vulnerable, and burning with a deep, controlled need. The feeling of helplessness. "It is a poison. The only cure I have found is your touch. Your scent." Elara, now free of the constraints of fear, walked toward him. She did not approach the king or the alpha. She approached the broken man who had confessed his pain. She lifted her hand and gently placed it on his exposed neck, where the collar had been. "The stone is cold no longer, my king," she whispered, her cinnamon scent flaring in response to his raw dominance. "It is merely waiting for warmth." The steamy intensity of the moment was overwhelming. Kaelen closed his eyes, leaning his massive head down until his forehead rested against hers, drawing in her scent like a desperate man taking his last breath. He took her face in his hands, his touch reverent, possessive, and unbearably tender. "Show me the light, Elara," he commanded, the word a plea, not an order. He lowered his head and took her mouth in a kiss of profound, consuming passion, a long overdue surrender. This was not the possessive kiss of the study. This was the full, earth-shattering union of Alpha and Omega. The raw dominance of his scent mixed with her forbidden sweetness, filling the nursery with a volatile, intoxicating cloud. They stood locked in a desperate, forbidden embrace, the consummation of their trust finally overriding their fear of the law. In that moment, the king and the guardian forged a bond stronger than any ritual, binding their hearts and their destinies together in the very center of the Citadel. Chapter 18. The Final Challenge and the Alpha's Fury. The elders, enraged by Kaelen's public rejection of a Luna and his visible, undeniable attachment to the Omega, launched their final, desperate challenge. Their plot was silent, swift, and designed to force Kaelen's hand. One morning, Elara was not in the nursery. Kaelen awoke to the horrifying absence of her scent, the air feeling suddenly cold and empty. He found a single, chilling note on his desk, bearing the seal of the Shadow Council. "The guardian of the heir has been removed for interrogation and re-education. The bloodline must be protected from contamination. The king will choose a Luna by nightfall, or she will face the full extent of the law." Kaelen's rage was immediate, absolute, and terrifying. It was the unleashed fury of the North's conqueror, the wrath of a betrayed mate. The Obsidian Citadel, for the first time in months, filled not with the sound of grief, but with the sound of a king's unbridled, seismic anger. He did not call for guards or a council meeting. He simply shifted, his body growing and twisting, his elegant clothes tearing away to reveal the raw, magnificent form of his alpha wolf, a colossal creature of shadow-black fur and burning golden eyes. His roar shook the castle to its foundations, a sound that communicated pure, lethal threat to every wolf within the citadel walls. Kaelen used his superior strength and scent to track Elara to a hidden, ancient interrogation chamber deep in the sublevels, the same dusty dungeons where Elara had spent her early life. He found her chained to a wall, facing the three elders, including Varys, who were preparing a ritualistic stripping of her scent and rank. "Stop." Kaelen's voice, though partially shifted, was a guttural command that slammed into the walls. Elder Varys, momentarily stunned by the sight of the king in his raw, alpha form, recovered quickly. "My king, this is necessary. She has poisoned your judgment. We are merely restoring order." Kaelen did not argue. He moved. With a speed that defied his massive size, he launched himself at the elders, not as a king, but as a protective predator. He grabbed Varys by the throat, lifting him clear off the ground, his teeth inches from the old wolf's jugular. "You dared to touch what is mine," Kaelen snarled, his wolf scent overwhelming the room. "You dared to threaten the peace of my son and the life of my mate. You have declared war on your king." He dropped Varys with a sickening thud, turning his rage onto the other two elders, their punishment swift and brutal, not death, but a savage beating that stripped them of their authority and left them whimpering in terror. He had destroyed the Shadow Council, not with a decree, but with raw, primal force, proving that his greatest strength was now anchored in his love and need for the Omega. Kaelen returned to Elara, still in his alpha form, his golden eyes filled with agonizing relief. He snapped the chains with a single, powerful jerk and shifted back, his body appearing, naked and magnificent, before her. He pulled her into his arms, a possessive, steamy embrace of sheer, unadulterated relief. "Never again," he swore, holding her tightly. "You are my strength, my only truth. We rule together or we fall together." Chapter 19. The New Covenant and the Alpha's Confession. The public, violent dismantling of the Shadow Council cemented Kaelen's rule and Elara's position as the true power behind the throne. The pack understood the message. The Alpha would tolerate no threat to his peace, and that peace was irrevocably embodied by the Omega. The fear of his rage had finally replaced the rigidity of the law. The following day, Kaelen made his final, most significant public move. He called a pack assembly, standing alone on the dais, Elara at his side, holding the heir. "The Shadow Council is dissolved," Kaelen declared, his voice ringing with absolute finality. "Their judgment was ruled by fear and outdated prejudice. My life, my son's life, and the future of the North were saved by the courage, the tenderness, and the strength of the Omega I chose to protect." He turned to Elara, his eyes shining with open, profound love, a tenderness the pack had never witnessed. He reached out and gently removed the cowl she still wore, a symbol of her subservience, and tossed it to the floor, officially ending the requirement for her to hide her scent or status. "I am the Alpha of the North. I rule with strength and dominion, but I have learned that strength without connection corrodes the soul. Elara Vanya is more than the guardian of the heir. She is my partner. She is the mother of my son's heart. She has the wisdom and the resilience to lead us into a new era. The rigid hierarchy of the old world is over." Kaelen then knelt before her, a stunning, unprecedented act of submission and reverence. The Alpha King, ruler of the North, knelt before the lowest caste Omega. "I confess my blindness, Elara," he spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. "I confess my failure to protect my first mate. I confess my absolute dependence on your love and your strength. Be my foundation. Be my shared command. Be my life." He did not ask her to be his Luna, a title tied to the old, failed customs. He asked her to be his partner, his co-ruler, his equal in all things that mattered. He slipped a simple, broad silver band onto her finger, a ring of guardianship, protection, and unspoken, eternal love. Elara's eyes were filled with unshed tears. She looked at the kneeling king, then at the peaceful child in her arms. She lifted her hand, placing it on Kaelen's cheek, her sweet scent a rush of forgiveness and acceptance. "I accept, my king," she whispered, her voice carrying the promise of a new covenant. "We will lead with compassion. We will rule with care." The entire pack, witnessing this public, raw admission of vulnerability and love, fell to their knees in acceptance. The sight of the powerful king kneeling to the gentle Omega was the definitive, final statement that love had rewritten the kingdom's destiny. Chapter 20. The Song of Spring and the Final Piece. The era of the New Covenant, led by Alpha Kaelen and the Guardian of the Heir, Elara, began with the arrival of the gentle, healing spring. The Obsidian Citadel, once a fortress of fear, now breathed as a sanctuary of care. The cry of the child had catalyzed unity and resilience, and the cold stone walls now held the constant, beautiful scent of cinnamon and wild honey. Torin, now walking, was a testament to the new order. He was a happy, robust child, equally comfortable in the Alpha's powerful embrace and the Omega's soft care. He was the living symbol of the inclusive, caring family unit that replaced the cold bloodline elite. The most enduring change was in Kaelen. His power was not diminished, but reframed. He led with confidence, but he consulted Elara on every matter of internal governance, acknowledging her innate wisdom and connection to the pack's heart. He was still the Alpha, fierce, possessive, and dominant, but his dominance was now directed at safeguarding the vulnerability he cherished. In the royal nursery, which was now simply called the Heir, the final, beautiful image unfolded. It was a sunlit afternoon, the wind carrying the scent of new blossoms from the valleys. Kaelen and Elara sat side by side on a thick rug, watching Torin play. Elara leaned into Kaelen, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm draped possessively around her. She was wearing her new silver ring, and her scent, completely unmasked, wove a steamy, comforting thread around them. "They're still talking in the lower ranks," Elara murmured, a soft smile on her face. "They say that the Alpha King was conquered not by an army, but by a lullaby." Kaelen chuckled, a low, rich sound that was new to the Citadel. He turned his head and kissed the sensitive skin behind her ear, a private, possessive reminder of their intimacy. "They are correct," he agreed. "You did not conquer me, Elara. You healed me. You showed me that my heart, once encased in fear and command, needed to open to reciprocal love." He pulled her closer, his lips near her hair. "The most enduring power is love, patient and enduring, capable of shaping a world. That is the legend we will leave." He began to hum, a deep, resonant, rhythmic sound that was no longer a confession of grief, but a song of profound, steamy contentment. Elara joined him, her soft, sweet melody weaving into his, the Alpha's heartbeat and the Omega's song, beating in perfect unison. Torin toddled toward them and settled between them, the center of their peaceful orbit. The legend of Silver Crest concluded not with a battle, but with a song, a testament to a transformed kingdom led by a king whose courage now included mercy and a guardian whose tenderness had become his power. The final image, a family orbiting around a single, peaceful heartbeat, united by a love that defied all law, reminded the pack that the most powerful force in the north was the quiet breath of their new era.